5 hungry, angry young men who were blessed with a degree of musicianship, lyrical capabilities and ear for melody that wanted to go out and take on the world, and that's exactly what they did.
Live was a real happening thing.
There was the X factor involved, and it made them so special on stage. Deep Purple's genesis, strangely enough, lies with a 60s pop band called The Searchers, who are known for hits like Sweets for My Sweet. And their drummer Chris Curtis in the mid-60s decided, firstly he wanted to sing, and secondly he wanted to go in a slightly psychedelic direction. So he came up with the concept of a band called Roundabout, which was a psychedelic experimental band initially. Got business backing and got together the first lineup of what was Roundabout with he and his brother Dave on vocals, co-vocals if you want, and a certain gentleman called Richie Blackmore on guitar and John Lord on keyboards, and Ian Pace on drums eventually. Then, for whatever reason, the whole Roundabout thing just dissipated. It fell apart. Curtis lost interest, went off to do other things, not a lot. However, Blackmore and Lord felt they could work together. Both had a lot of respect and a lot of experience on the session circuit, really, and also playing around on the club circuit in bands. So they decided to stick together and see what they could actually mould out of Roundabout. They brought in a guy called Nick Simper on bass, who used to be with the Pirates, and Rod Evans on vocals, who, along with Ian Pace, had been in a band called The Maze. And they started to noodle around with sounds and ideas. Fortunately, the business backing, which had been put in place originally by Chris Curtis, stayed there, so they had the opportunity to move forward.
If you look at probably the way Purple was set up, you know, sort of management sort of involved, and you know, they're a new band and they're going to need something that's going to push them to the fore, and there's nothing easier to push you to the fore than to cover something that's already been popular.
Hush had something about it right from the off. I felt, I'm not sure about the others, but I think we all felt that there was something a bit special about it. There was a version out by Joe South, there was a version out by a guy called Chris Ife. And we'd only heard it like in backgrounds, like you're in a disco or you're in a nightclub and you hear this thing and you think, oh, that's a good tune, that's a good one. And a friend of mine who was working, a guy called Roddy Freeman, who was a singer with the Ronnie Smith band, which also had Ashley Holt in its membership and Rick Wakeman. They did it on stage, and I happened to mention it to Rod Freeman, and he said, I could come round and teach you the song. And he actually came round with his guitar and he wrote the lyrics out and he said, this is how it goes. And we actually learnt the song off Rod Freeman without ever really hearing the record, which I think made it a little bit different. I mean, we didn't know in the American market that someone could have a hit and someone would do the same song maybe 6 months, a year later and have a hit all over again, because that didn't tend to happen in England, but it happened in America big time for us. So we were quite pleased about it. I was quite pleased with the way the bass line turned out, and the vocals were a little bit shaky. Me and Rod and John doing our best. But it had that little bit of magic that's very hard to define. She broke my heart, but I love just say now hush, hush. Lord, I heard her calling my name now hush, hush. I need her loving and I'm not to blame. In the morning, I'm thinking I need him. Oh, I need him.
I started a long while ago in in the R&B 60s in England, and that's where I sort of learnt my chops and everything. And a lot of those things that I learnt have all been useful along the way, but I've really felt in Purple it was either totally one thing, which is soloing like a mad mother, or being a rhythm guitarist with keyboard shaped. And that was fine for Purple. It was a big part of the sound.
And of course, when Hush came out in this country, nobody bothered. Nobody promoted us. I did hear that people were told not to work on that one because the Beatles had got a new single coming out, so give everything to the new Beatles single. People were going in the shops trying to buy Deep Purple, they couldn't buy us.
The problem was that it was almost too soon, and like other bands in the past subsequently have found, it's all very well having a hit single almost off the bat, but somehow it becomes a millstone round your neck. And the pressure was on for Purple to try and follow it up with something else. They did a lot of covers on their first 3 albums, but nothing ever really followed commercially in the wake of Hush.
We were kind of desperately looking for another hit record, and I think that's where we went wrong, because there was always pressure. You've got to have this hit record. I don't think we needed a hit record. You know, things were changing. You know, Led Zeppelin had started. They'd come over to America. They were touring the same venues we were. Vanilla Fudge didn't have hit records any longer, but these guys, they had the acts that were selling out. There was no reason why we couldn't do the same. We just needed time and to get rid of that pressure.
3 albums they did as Mark I, which were Shades of Deep Purple, The Book of Taliesin and Deep Purple itself, all recorded and released within 9 months. 9-month period, 3 albums, and also a track which was a non-album single. That's phenomenal. That's prolific. They really went at it at an incredible rate. I mean, think about it. They were recording, going out doing a short tour, recording, going out and doing a short tour, recording, going out and doing a short tour. What Mark I had was an interesting experimental attitude. They went out and just explored all over the place musically. They were trying to find themselves. And by finding themselves, ironically, they ended up splitting up that particular incarnation of the band. It was obvious to Blackmore and Lawwood, who'd started the real Deep Purple in the first place, that they wanted to go in a direction that was very heavy with classical leanings and allow them to really stand back on their real strengths as musicians. Ian Pace was a phenomenal drummer, is a phenomenal drummer, and fitted perfectly into what they wanted to do. But the real weakness lay with the fact that it was obvious to them that neither Rod Evans on vocals nor Nick Simper on bass were going to be able to cut it.
Well, Nicky wasn't constructive. He didn't have any ideas, and he was an average bass player, so he had to go. Rod just wanted to go to America and live in America, and he's doing very well. He always does very well. I mean, Rod's a very nice guy. Well, so Nicky was, but he got very bitter.
We were due to record a song called Hallelujah, and amongst other titles. And Rod Evans was still in America arranging his marriage. And they're telling me that we're going in the studio, and I said, well, how can we go in the studio, you know, if we haven't got Rod with us? And John said, well, we know the keys and everything, so we can put backtracks down, and then Rod will come over and put his vocal on. So I swallowed that. I was told that we couldn't have the studio in the afternoon, we could only have it morning and evening. The plan was to bring Ian Gillan in the afternoon to learn the vocal and possibly put it on, and then when I turned up in the evening I was going to be told what was going down, that we were getting a new singer in. Now this may be true or not, but that's what I was told by the road crew who overheard everything going down. And apparently when the roadie went round to pick up Ian Gillan, Roger Glover happened to be there, so he came along for the ride.
Roger, we found him in a gutter. No, Roger, poor old Roger. He turned up to the session to do one number we did. He was their bass player. We weren't originally going to take him until Pacey said, he's a good bass player, let's keep him. So I said, okay.
I was actually going out of the door that evening to get in the car to go to the studio when the phone rang, and I went back to answer it, and it was John Lord. And he said, bad news. I said, what's that? He said, the session is off tonight. I said, off? Why is that then? He said, oh, they got problems with the 4-track machine, it's playing up. I said, anything we can do with the 2-track machine? Oh, he said, that's playing up as well. I can remember his exact words, even though it was a long time ago. And he said, so you got a night off? So I said, oh good, I'll take my girlfriend to the pictures, fine, you know, do the night off. So, of course, I never smelt a rat, I never suspected a thing. And the word crept out, and it got to a stage where everybody knew that Rod Evans and myself were out of Deep Purple. The only ones that didn't know were me and Rod Evans. I mean, can you believe that? So I called up Tetragrammaton in America. Of course, they were pretty shocked to have me on the line. And I said, I thought I'll play it cool. I said, what's going on with this? What's the plans for this single we're doing, Hallelujah? And they said, yeah, we got a copy of Hallelujah, but you're not on it. Can you imagine how I felt? We went off to play somewhere in Wales. And I thought, if I tell Rod Evans before the gig, he's probably just going to hit someone with an axe or something. He'll just go nuts. And I kept really cool. I thought, you know, I mean, really, I wanted to just get hold of somebody and lay them out. But I thought, no, keep it cool, protect your own interest, because they can't just do this and get away with it. You know, there's money at stake here. But it ended up so it was just Rod and I going back from Wales in the car. We dropped the others off at various places. And I told him, and he went absolutely nuts, you know. He said, I knew something was going on. He said, I'm going to kill those guys. He said, we'll dump this car in the canal. And I said, don't be silly, it's our car. We can't dump the car in the canal. He was just so mad, you know, to get kind of revenge. So he said, right, let's go and see John Coletta. So we drove down to Brighton to John Coletta's house. And I can imagine John Coletta wasn't too thrilled to see us on the doorstep. You know, his jaw just sort of sagged. And he said, I said, the game's up, John. I said, we know. And he just said, well, you better come in. So I phoned up John Lord, and no, he phoned up John Lord, that's right, and said, they know. He said, Nick and Rod are here. He said, and they know. And he said, I'll put you on to him, you know. And I just said, what's it all about, John? What's the story? Oh, I can't tell you now, he said. It's a little bit me, it's a little bit Richie, it's a little bit Ian. He said, you must come round to dinner and I'll explain everything. I never heard from him again.
Over the world, scratching on the ground, looking for a peace that nobody has found. I am the spokesman.
Ian Gillan and Roger Glover brought a new strength to Deep Purple. Roger Glover is a very firm, steady, sturdy bassist, but a very talented musician and an excellent producer and songwriter. So he had all those abilities he brought into Purple. Gillan has a great voice, one of the great voices, which Blackmore and Lord and Pace immediately recognised as something they wanted in Deep Purple. This guy has a banshee wail, he could sing the blues, had a tremendous range, looked fantastic, and it was obvious that this was a man who could help take Deep Purple to a new level.
Your image comes first. You don't realise you've got an image until you read what somebody's written about you in the paper, and then subconsciously or subliminally that becomes your image, and you try and live up to it or down to it or whatever you've done.
Right.
And so what the hell anyway? You're not a real person. You're no longer a real person. And your off-stage person becomes a whole farce. And eventually it's a complete turnaround, because the only time you're really being yourself is when you're on stage.
John Lord has always said he had a vision, an idea, a dream about doing an album or doing a musical score which combined the heaviness of a rock band with the classical competence of an orchestra. And he came up with the idea of Concerto for group and orchestra, which they did with the London Philharmonic, with Malcolm, now Sir Malcolm Arnold, conducting.
Concerto for Group and Orchestra is one of those things that I think to this day still divides people as to whether or not it was successful.
To be honest with you, I find it heavy going, and quite unremarkable, I have to say. I guess you had to have been there.
I think you have to realise that at the time it was done, the late 60s, the early 70s, rock music was all about breaking down barriers, doing things that nobody had ever done before. And nobody had ever really married classical and rock music together up until that point.
And everybody thought Purple had lost their minds. This is crazy. What the hell are you doing? You're doing the most pompous thing in the world. Think about it. You're doing a classical piece of music composed by John Lord with one of the greatest orchestras in the world and doing it with a rock band? How does it work? And John always felt that the original recording didn't quite work because they hadn't really gelled it properly. That the orchestra, as you can understand, were feeling a little bit like we've been spent years classically trained playing these great pieces of timeless music by some of the greatest composers of all time. Now we're playing some long-haired gits. A rock band? What's all that about?
If you watch the footage of that performance, I think ultimately it did work. And apparently Sir William Walton was in the audience that night, one of Britain's leading classical figures, and he commented that he thought the concerto worked. So who am I to argue with somebody of that ilk?
In Rock is one of the great albums. Not by Purple, not just by Purple, by anybody.
Everything fell into place within rock.
It was an album that you listen to now, and it starts off with Speaking, and you can make the case that this was the birth of thrash. It's a really heavy, powerful, dynamic, driving song.
When I first heard the opening salvo of Speed King, I just about had a heart attack. I mean, I was a wee boy, and it was like, my God, can you make this noise with guitars and, you know, and a keyboard?
Something that I got fed up with playing with classical orchestras, and I thought, well, this is my turn. I'm the rock kind of thing, you know. So John was into more classical. I said, well, you've done that. I'll do the rock. Whatever turns out the best, we'll carry on with. And I said, if this fails, this record, then I'll play with orchestras the rest of my life.
You don't think it failed?
Pardon?
You don't think it failed in rock?
Well, hardly.
No,
she was rocking in the blue light. Rocking to the east and west. Hard-headed woman and a soft-hearted man. Caught the trouble since it all began. Took a little rice, took a little beans. Rock and roll down to New Orleans. I'm a speed king. You gotta hear me sing. I'm a speed king. See me fly.
Yeah, I think In Rock was probably the first sort of really cohesive album that Deep Purple did. And I think probably that was partly due to the fact that you obviously had Ian Gillan and Roger Glover had come on board the band at that stage, and also brought in their songwriting ideas to the band. I think before then Purple was sort of going in different directions with John Lord's sort of classical ideas and also doing a lot of cover songs they were on the earlier albums. They suddenly had this direction, which was probably largely due to Ritchie Blackmore, who wanted an out-and-out hard rock album.
That's what made that In Rock album a superb album, because they were bringing in new writers, so there was new ideas, there's new stimulation. And the whole album, I don't think there's a song that I don't enjoy on the whole album.
Sweet child, in time, you'll see the line that's drawn between.
Yeah, it was a good LP. It was very, very, everything was about 20, everything was about 1,000 miles an hour. It was good LP, that. Objectively speaking, I think so. Everything on there was good. I think there was one track I really hated.
If you feel bad, Lord, I bet you have.
Child in Time works musically because it's got so many different dynamics to it. You've got that gentle, quiet organ intro to it, which sort of lulls one into a false sense of security. It starts like a ballad, but then suddenly it all changes gear, kicks in, it really rocks along. You've got a blistering guitar solo, Gillan screaming at the top of his voice, and it's exactly the sort of thing that Purple wanted for that album in rock, because it's got those dynamics of epic proportions.
One of Ian Gillan's greatest performances, where he introduced that scream that would then become his trademark throughout his career. And many guys, myself and other people included, have tried to emulate that, but there was only one guy who could really get that massive vocal scream.
How Ian Gillan remains almost in complete control of his voice whilst going completely insane is remarkable. What a great piece of music.
It's not a song about screaming, but it's a song that people remember that vocally. And then of course it has the stunning guitar solo from Ritchie Blackmore. I mean, he was on fire on that record. Absolutely on fire.
If anything that Purple, that people know and love, could be remotely termed as prog rock, then maybe Child in Time was it. But I mean, it's just this epic rock track with Gillan singing out of his skin. This is, the new guy really, and the band just come alive. It's just like a different band to anything that Purple have done before. I mean, they're absolutely cooking on all cylinders. It's just, it's just great heavy rock.
Exactly what Mark II needed. They'd done Concerto for group and orchestra, got themselves off the ground and rocked a little bit, not necessarily in a great way, because people were wondering, what the hell are you doing? Where are you going? And then they found their direction. They found that way of combining heaviness with classical ability, bringing out the best in Ritchie Blackmore and John Lord, and making sure that Ian Gillan shot.
I don't play anything I don't want to. Smoke was one of my favourite tracks. Mary Long was one of my favourite tracks. Machine Head's good. What else? Speaking was... Into the Fire was very good, I thought. Child in Time was good, purely from the vocal point of view. It was very, very different. In rock was good, but it was a good period, but we were coming up, you know what I mean?
There was no composition on the Purple things. There were basic ideas when you went into the studio. Maybe the magic with Purple in the old days was it was so spontaneous, because when we got it on tape, it was the first time we ever played it. So maybe that was the magic then. But by the same token, we often came across things which we enjoyed playing, but if you took it out of context of an album, you'd say it was dull. You wouldn't listen to it. In the context of a 35, 40-minute album, it was right.
To get it onto tape, pain in the fucking arse. That's why I don't like recording too much.
You don't?
No. It's too clinical, again. A lot of people love it because they can edit their music, put it together and make it nice, but when they get on stage, they're lost. Well, my type of way of thinking is the opposite. I love to have that freedom, just going on stage and playing whatever I want to play.
time. I mean, I'll play the numbers which I'm supposed to play, but the in-between parts, if I'm feeling good, I'll be away and play something completely off the wall. I've never ever played in my life.
Deep Purple had that X factor which separates all the great bands. It wasn't just about 5 individuals working to a maximum and therefore you had Deep Purple. You had 5 individuals working to a maximum plus something, because there was the X factor involved and it made them so special on stage.
I love working with people who are going to push me because I get a lot of energy. For example, of Richie. I mean, Richie, when he's playing on stage, tries to blast everyone off the stage.
Right.
Right. I mean, it's a kind of competition. One of the things Richie said to me when I joined Deep Purple, he said, "You've got to bear this in mind." He said, "I don't mean it badly, he said, but I'm going to try and blow you off stage every night." I said, "All right, great." I said, "Well, in that case, I'm going to try and do the same for you." He said, "Yeah, great." He said, "In that way, we'll have a good band."
Purple could play 6, 7, 8, 10-minute piece of music. And the fact that it was played with a certain amount of skill and talent and a lot of bollocks, you know, made it happen.
It's that combination of the moody, magnificent Blackmore Man in Black performance, playing fluidly but always looking a little bit enigmatic. John Lord looking very much like the Lord of the Manor behind his keyboards, playing as if he is the classical master, but also throwing in some really heavy pumping as well. Ian Pace and Roger Glover, rock solid, not moving, but within the rock solid, not moving attitude, they played a lot of interesting stuff as well. They were virtuosos in their own right, and up front the charismatic Ian Gillan. And charismatic is a word which describes him. Flowing mane of hair, a man who had a great sense of humour, a tremendous sense of irony as well, but also a man who knew how to deliver a song, deliver it with power or subtlety. He could make you cry, he could make you laugh in turns. And this was what made Mark II work, that it brought out the best in each of them. Every single one of those performers was working at their absolute peak. And when you got 5 such masters working together, moulding together at the absolute peak, you know what you get, a great band.
On stage you have a lot of intense excitement. It's like adrenaline, kind of nervous presence.
Right.
People either love it or they get scared of it. You know? It's a bit too, you know.
Right.
That's why we have a lot of people that maybe hate us, because we're so demanding. You don't like the music, you've got to turn it off. What we put down, you just can't talk over our music.
Right.
And we don't want anybody talking over it, so they either say nothing or they leave. And that's why we get, for instance, no radio play in England, because the housewives can't do their dusting when we're playing on the radio, because it probably interferes with the hoover or something.
This is the border of Devon and Cornwall, about 6 hours' drive from London. It's the middle of winter, so there's not a tourist to be seen, and the beaches and hills look deserted. But for the last fortnight, these hills have been shaken by the sound of one of England's top groups, Deep Purple.
I always had this big sort of debates with Richie and John and Liam and Roger about my favourite Purple album. I'll tell you the reason why in a second. My favourite Purple album was Fireball.
really hate the game. Looking at them all, I wanna be humble again.
And the reason I like that so much was because I felt it was, from a writing point of view, it was really the beginning of tremendous possibilities of expression. And I just went out and bought it yesterday again in New York and been playing it to Bruce. And some of the tracks on that album, I think are really, really inventive. And in those days, before it was really being called heavy rock, it was still being called, what, progressive or something like that, which was the tag that was being put onto it, the kind of music. And I really thought that some of the tracks on there were very progressive rock numbers, very progressive. And I've just been playing it again now. I listened to it in rock as well, which I was, knocked out with. But I thought that it was a shame that we didn't sort of continue with that sort of expression in our writing, which, as opposed to the sort of slightly formulated approach to our later albums.
The only ones I haven't liked have been Fireball. It's the only one I thought was like nowhere. Yeah, I know a lot of people don't like that LP for some reason.
I think it's a really good LP.
Didn't see it, There's just nothing on it.
I think when Fireball was released, there's a lot of people initially were disappointed with it. Not least the band members themselves. They all pretty much went on record as not being too complimentary about it, except for Ian Gillan, who cited it as his favourite Purple album.
If Ritchie Blackmore doesn't like Fireball, then that is a very, very good chance that the reason that Gillan has said that, that would be the reason that he would say it, just to wind Ritchie up, because those two have famously been at each other's throats since Gillan left the band in the mid-70s.
Fireball is the album sandwiched between In Rock and Machine Head, two all-time classics, and sometimes gets overlooked because they tried to be a bit more progressive on that album. It's their progressive rock album, if you will. They tried progression in various songs on albums, but this was the album that really brought it all together more than any other. You listen to the more laid-back bluesy style of Anyone's Daughter, and it's still got a feel of lengthy exposition. It's got The Mule, which again is very lengthy. No, 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 Fireball itself. It's got some very long, intricate compositions. It takes a lot of listening to.
Fireball was such a departure from In Rock for my little group of friends that it was where is the energy and the power. It sounds different as well, because it's probably recorded in a little farmhouse in Wales where everybody was freezing to death, and I'm only doing this once, I can't do it again, I'm freezing. It doesn't sound the same as In Rock. But if you go back and you listen to it now, you can hear the class that's in Ian Gillan's voice. His voice is, he's obviously been touring. You can hear the dryness and the rawness that's in the vocals in some of these songs. The lyrics are incredible. On No One Came and No, 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 he's being more personal about, superstardom has arrived on him, and he's standing shimmering in his suit of white, and Richie's off in his suit of Robin Hood green, and everybody wants to know who he is. Who are you? No one came from miles around. And he's telling stories in there, and it's very much more a lyrical album with Gillan.
Do you like Mickey Mouse?
Fireball, that was a bit of a disaster because it was like thrown together in a studio We had no time, managerial pressure. You've got to play here, there, and you've got to make an LP. And then you're back to Australia, you're back to here. I got kind of bitter about that. I thought, if you want an LP, you've got to give us time.
Right.
And they wouldn't. So I got a little bit bitter there, and I just threw ideas to the rest of the group that I thought up on the spur of the moment. I had nothing in my head.
Is it getting better? No. Do we love each other? No. I'm not sweet way forever. No.
One of the great things about Fireball is it makes you want to go back and explore it further. Within rock and with Machine Head, what you hear immediately is what you get. Great music that stands up all the way through, absolutely. However, you don't go back and rediscover anything new about it. With Fireball, that was always the case. You'd hear it and think this is a good album, not as good as in rock because it doesn't make an immediate impact like in rock, but you want to go back and explore it further and further. So when Ian Gillan says it's the greatest of all the Deep Purple albums, certainly the ones he was involved in, maybe he had a point. As an album, maybe it is the best. Although you can certainly make a case for In Rock and Machine Head in the same way as well.
Nobody gonna take my car, we're gonna raise it to the ground. Nobody gonna take my car, we're gonna break this bill sound. Oh, it's a killer machine, they're gonna take you all around. Oh, like Steve McQueen and Mickey Mouse and all that love. Oh, nobody ever gonna beat my car. I got it, we got it.
I think one of the key things about Highway Star that maybe not everybody knows about is that it was created in a very instantaneous way. The band was on the tour bus heading for a gig in Portsmouth at the time, and they had some journalists on board with them. One of them just asked Richie Blackmore, how do you write your songs? And he just picked the guitar up and just started playing this riff off the top of his head. Ian Gillan started singing his lyrics about we're driving on the road, etc. And that night they actually put it in the show. They wrote it on the bus on the way to the gig, played it live, and it perfectly encapsulates one of the key elements of Purple, the spontaneity aspect.
Highway Star works because of the pulsating rhythm of it, with the interplay between the keyboards, when the keyboards are coming in, and you have Richie just hitting that one string, and it's like a pot coming to boil. It's gradually building up. Ian Pace is playing his hi-hats, and then the snare comes in, and it's gradually, and it's just coming up to this, and then all of a sudden it's just unleashed, and the pot is boiling over, and you're in this mad chase, and it's a driving song. It's a Highway Star, and it's moving so fast with so much energy, and then you get to the keyboard solo, and John Lord's off on one. You know, where did that come from? And he's off, and he's playing in the intensity, and the band are moving around behind him, playing slightly different rhythms on the guitar and slightly different drum fills, and then we go back into another verse, and then comes another one of Richie's great guitar solos.
Machine Head, they gave us, because of the Fireball result, they said, all right, we'll give you 2 months off. Consequently, it was a great LP, I thought. And we had ideas, Ian Gillan, himself and Roger. It began to become a trio writing then.
Right.
John started stepping back, and Ian just gives percussive ideas.
Right.
So it was a trio by Machine Head.
Machine Head, I think, is an album that the band wanted to make after what they considered was the relative failure of Fireball. An album that saw them getting back onto the straight and narrow with more direct, out-and-out rock songs. And they also had the beauty that it was recorded over a 2-week period, not whilst the band was jetting in and out of the studio, like from constant gigging. And perhaps because of that, they had that concentrated period of writing. They produced what have arguably become some of Purple's finest songs.
I mean, it's the best album that the Mark II lineup made, and easily one of the best albums that Purple have ever made in their entire career. Absolutely terrific record. Like In Rock, which is the first studio record that the Mark II lineup sort of worked on. You know, everything fell into place there. And Machine Head, you just get the feeling that everything again has just all fallen into place. It was the right time, the right place to record the album, you know, the right group of songs. It just works. You listen to it as an album and it's, you know, I mean, it's always held up as the best, often the best Deep Purple album and certainly the best Mark II album. And Fireball wasn't a brilliant record, so it stands to reason that, you know, everyone's going to be like, oh, thank God Purple are back on form with this.
Nobody gonna beat my car, but gonna raise them to the ground. And nobody gonna pick it out, they're gonna break the spinning sound.
Machine Head was kind of spoiled for me because I heard Made in Japan first. And Made in Japan has more tempo. It's up tempo than Machine Head is, and the versions of the song for me on Made in Japan knock the Machine Head versions stone down. I mean, the playing and everything's on it, the sound is great. Again, Gillan's at the top of his form. Everybody's playing well. John's got that really heavy, meaty Hammond sound. And there's some beautiful runs in it. Song-wise and performance-wise, Made in Japan, I think, kicks Machine Head's ass.
But it's not the album the band wanted to make. That's the strange thing about it. The band set out to do a double album. They went out to Montreux to do one album of studio songs, i.e. what became Machine Head, plus another album which they were going to record almost in concert. A simulated concert in a ballroom in Switzerland, which was going to be captured by the Rolling Stones mobile and then put out to make a double album. What happened, unfortunately, was the incident from which Smoke on the Water was inspired happened. The bloody thing burnt down. Put the whole thing on hold, everything changed, so we ended up with them recording Smoke on the Water. That's the positive side, but not ever recording the live album, which would have made Machine Head maybe something slightly different. However, who cares? Machine Head came out, it's a fabulous record. It's probably the best of the Mark II albums. You look at them and think, Fireball's the one that's lasted so well, and over the period of time is the one that you go back and revisit to discover things. In Rock has got the spectacular Child in Time and one of the great openings, Speaking. But you know what? For all-round consistency, I'd go for Machine Head as the best album that Mark II did.
She's too much, she's never gonna leave my side. I need her, I want her, all right. I'm a rolling stone, baby.
By the time the band had done Machine Head and the toured on the back of it, things were really starting to fall apart. Ian Gillan had enough. In fact, Ian Gillan had more than enough. I think there were real signs of a breakdown in communication, especially between he and Richie Blackmore, which has carried on through the years, to be honest. They've never gone on. They've worked together on and off, time and again, always eventually fallen down because the age-old problems come back. There's a clash of personality, clash of egos, clash of temperament between the two of them. So in August 1972, Ian Gillan resigned from Deep Purple. He didn't leave for another 10 months because of touring commitments, and they did an album, Who Do We Think We Are, in that point. Can you imagine how crazy it is? I want to leave the band. Yeah, fine, we've got all these commitments. Okay, how long are they going to take? Oh, not long. 10 months before his resignation became actuality. That's a hell of a long period of notice.
Who do we think we are? was really weird because I never spoke to Ian Gillan all that time we made the LP. I never spoke to him once. Old ladies started coming into it and all these personal problems, you know. Everybody refused to write with everybody else. And so, you know, I was even holding back ideas. I was saying, I'm not going to give you Purple this idea because this is going to another thing, you know. So I was turning out shit, so was everybody else, you know. Just rubbish. Who Do We Think We Are was bad. Waste of time.
What do I think of Who Do We Think We Are? I agree with Roger Glover's analogy that it's a shit record.
I think one of the things with Who Do We Think We Are was the fact that the band wasn't as cohesive at that point. There was certain band members not seeing eye to eye, and Ian Gillan would go in the studio separately to record his vocals. The band would go in one day, he would go in the next day, and perhaps that comes through on the record to people that there's not so much cohesion. Also, obviously, the track Smooth Dancer, the lyrics to that Gillan wrote about Ritchie Blackmore and summing up his feelings about the guitar player at that time. So there's probably a bitterness that sometimes comes through with that record as well.
You know, every album started with the same tempo number and the expression. You know, I mean, it was just it. That's the way it was. That's one of the reasons I left, because I was becoming stagnant. You know, we became so entrenched in these parallel lines beyond which we dare not pass, because that was the Purple identity and the Purple image.
Right.
That we were really restricting our means of expression.
I don't just play what I want to play, I play, well, people want to hear this, you know, which is what it's about. I don't like to play for myself, I've done that for too many years. Now it's a case of what's going to be good for people that are listening, you know. Right. It's only fair. If you want people to buy your records, then you should play to them. You shouldn't like play to yourself. That's what it's about. Success is playing to the people, not playing to yourself.
When Ian Gillan finally said he wanted to quit Purple in August '72, it set Blackmore thinking. Now, Blackmore was in a position of quite a powerful position actually at the time, and he intimated that maybe he had enough as well. Now, I still don't know whether he did that as a power game or genuinely had enough. The management of the band effectively said to him, we'll give you complete control creatively of what they do if you'll stay. And he accepted that. And Blackmore had an idea. He wanted to bring in not one but two vocalists. He wanted to bring in Glenn Hughes, a young guy in trapeze who had a fantastic soul funk style of voice and was a brilliant virtuoso bassist, and Paul Rodgers of Free Fame on vocals, to have two vocalists as it were. So effectively what he was saying was, I don't see a role for Roger Glover in this band anymore. Roger Glover effectively accepted it and resigned as well and said, well, if the vision of the band no longer includes what I do, why am I hanging around? I might as well go with Ian.
The musical hallmarks of the Mark II Deep Purple. It's like asking, how big is the universe? You could always find something in every song that they ever did that was hugely exciting, hugely inspirational. I think as a catalogue, those first 5 albums, In Rock, Fireball, Machine Head, Who Do We Think We Are, and Made in Japan, are about as good as it gets.
you're opening up a whole can of worms now when you start to discuss the veritable merits of the Mark II lineup and the Mark III lineup, because the Purple fans have argued ever since it happened and will argue until the end of time about this.
To the land, people are saying the woman is damned. They shall burn with the wave of the hand.
All I can say is, from my own personal point of view, that the Coverdale Hughes era is my favourite.
You know, it only lasted maybe another 3 years after that, or 2 years with Ritchie, but it certainly made it different, and they made two very, very exciting albums.
I was asked to join in maybe April or May, and officially in the papers in June. Of course, by June, when I was announced, we were actually kind of looking for a singer. I'd moved in with Ian Pace. I'd become very friendly with Ritchie. We'd gone to the inaugural Hamburg incident where Ritchie likes to take new guys. Spent a weekend with Ritchie, and of course John Law's a fabulous fella. And felt very much part of the organisation. And, you know, auditioning a singer was not really difficult, because there was only one guy we ever auditioned. It was David Coverdale.
I asked him to type in a photograph down and asked him if I could have the job. Basically, it was, I was working in a shop, and I didn't expect to get the job with Purple. If I'd gotten an audition, I was hoping, I knew they had their own record label, I was hoping that they could offer me something on my own, or say, well look, I'm afraid your voice isn't the sort of voice we're looking for, but we know somebody who is, you know. But after blowing with the band, I couldn't believe it, you know. I went apeshit, really. I couldn't sleep, and also all this bit. I'd always worked with good musicians, Steve, don't get me wrong, but this was like another level. It was so in tune with what I wanted, you know, and well, fortunately I was with what they wanted, you know. So it's worked out really very well. But it was the first time I'd gotten off my arse to do something, you know, and it paid off.
Blackmore's vision with Deep Purple when he put Mark III together seemed to be to have two vocalists. I think he believed he could bring out the best in the songs that they'd already done, and also bring out the best in where he saw the band going, which was much more into giving each vocalist something that they were very comfortable with, but the overall be one singer, as it were. Ian Gillan couldn't do certain things with his voice. He wasn't very soulful or funky in the way he sang. He was a heavy rock singer, full stop, with a blues influence. You had in David Coverdale something very similar, not a screamer, someone slightly more smooth, but certainly from the blues background. With Glenn Hughes and his slightly more funky approach, what it allowed was Deep Purple to open up their songwriting, take in different influences. So to have two, because realistically, you weren't going to find one person who could do that.
He brought in that high voice end to the voice that Ian Gillan had. So you had the best of both worlds then. And David Coverdale and Glenn Hughes' voices blended so well together. They complemented each other really well.
Warning came, no one came, the shaking was stood and stared. When it came, no one was spared. Still here.
Being a new guy in any band is always kind of interesting. David and I were 4, 5, 6, 7 years younger than the rest of the chaps. And I was coming off a career in trapeze, which we were knocking on the door very big in America. We'd already been selling 5,000, 10,000 seats a night, already had a top 60 record in America with trapeze, so I felt real strong. And it was a time for me where I was becoming a songwriter as well.
Glenn Hughes wanted to be the singer in Deep Purple. He didn't feel it was necessary to have anybody else. And you know what? With the type of voice Glenn has and had, he didn't need anybody else really. He could front the band easily enough. Brilliant bassist, was a rock star in looks, fantastic voice. And Glenn, being a competitive bastard, which he was and is, set out to upstage David Coverdale every night.
You know we had no time. We could not even time. You know we had no time.
The band had a great reputation, which, you know, basically the new band had to live up to and go past, if possible, you know. But like the moment I joined the band, it was never, you know, never mentioned by any member of the band that I was a replacement or Glenn was a replacement. As far as we were concerned, it was a new band, you know. The fact that it's called Deep Purple is because when you get the three musicians, John, Richie and Ian together, that is the nucleus and that is the sound of Purple. All I can do is write and put my voice on, you know, the things there, but there's no way I can change the sound, you know, because Blackmore, John and Ian together have their own sound.
David Coverdale came from a boutique in Redcar to headlining on his first tour in America in front of 600,000 people at the California Jam in 1974. That is a tremendous transformation, a transformation that still stands to this day. And I feel that David Coverdale was almost a sacrificial lamb in those days with Purple. Very good voice, looked completely awful. You just look at the pictures of him in those days, he looked dreadful.
He was overweight. He had this very sort of puffy, not the mane of hair he had when the album came out. He had a lazy eye, and he had what John Lord described to me as what looked like a little caterpillar on his top lip. And they packed him off to a health farm, and also had his eye sorted out. And apparently when he turned up, Lord, who sported a quite robust moustache, said to him, what's that? Coverdale said, oh, it's my moustache, man. He went, there's only one moustache in this fucking band and it's mine. Shave it off.
I think David Coverdale was a good replacement in the fact that the music was shifting into that bluesier area. And if you listen to the music that they did with David Coverdale, you'd find it hard to imagine Ian Gillan singing some of those songs.
Presumably you're nearer normality than now. I mean, they've been living in this fantasy world so many years. Presumably the contrast between...
I've always had the fantasy there, you know.
Sorry?
I've always wanted, I've known what it was about, you know. I just wanted to, instead of standing outside the door, I wanted to get in, you know.
And you're happy now you're there?
I'm very happy, yeah. Right.
People now say to me, what's it like to be a superstar? And I say, pardon? Because I'm still playing the same as I did before, but it's like changing a job. It's like anyone changing a job. I'm playing with better people. The money side is there. I mean, financially it's fine, but it's a change of job. And to be called a superstar just because you've changed your job or firm's input is just stupid to me.
I bought a foundation of groove. I bought more melody, probably in the vocal department. I bought harmonic textures in the harmonies, and I added a little swagger for sure on the low end. With me, it's the notes I didn't play in Deep Purple that were more apparent than the notes that Roger played. It would have been silly to have a bass player come in and be a Roger Glover. And people have called me the funky influence in Deep Purple. They knew that going into it. That's my background. I am that kind of bass player. I'm a soul singer in a rock band. And I think the difference and the beauty of Gillan and Glover, from Who Do You Think We Are to Burn, stands up amazingly.
I don't know whether the harmony vocals were necessarily an improvement. They were quite simply a different facet to the Deep Purple sound. The whole sound really had changed.
I know that Richie liked the Cream sound, with Jack Bruce and Eric Clapton doing the harmonies. So that was a sort of way of getting that in, and it just made the sound different and interesting, and gave them a bit more lease of life.
Well, it's a new direction altogether, and I think that they've got to forget the past and really do what they're going to do. I would like to see more strength of personality coming through, and I would like to see a little more naivety, a little less know-how.
Right.
But I still think the band's great. You know, if you want, you know, I'm really only picking out. I mean, it would be so easy to say, yeah, they're great, fantastic, and everything like that, which of course they are. But I mean, trying to be constructive, I would like to see a fresher, slightly more carefree approach instead of the cold, calculated approach, which I get the feeling is when I listen to music.
David Coverdale brought a very bluesy approach, which Ian Gillan doesn't have. A throatier, darker, deeper, soulful voice. And I don't use those words, I mean, I'm using the words soul and funky in a way I feel comfortable with. Let's use those words properly. Deep Purple were known as a hard rock band. #1 rock band in the world, if you will, at the time with Led Zeppelin and Yes. But like I said earlier in the interview, what's the point of having two clones of Gillan and Glover coming in and recreating Machine Head? A very bold move by the rest of the band to bring two guys in who are going to change the scope of rock again, and the Burn album stands up in the history and annals of rock history.
Burn is a brilliant record, and it is, to risk the wrath of Mark II fans, up there with In Rock and Machine Head as one of the best albums that Deep Purple ever made.
It's a magnificent comeback. Who Do We Think We Are, which was the end of Mark II, was the end of Mark II. It felt like the end. It was not a great record. They come storming back with Burn, which is a vibrant reintroduction to Deep Purple, opens up a new chapter, actually opens up a new volume in their book. It's got the funky element, it's still got that classical influence, it's got anthems, it's got power, it's got two vocalists who really do go for it, and it's got some songs that just really knock you back.
I think, you know, as far as Mark I, Mark II, Mark III, I think Burn stands up with a classic album like Machine Head, simply because it is a bold step forward. It is two new guys coming in with three very accomplished musicians who have stamped their authority on a record immediately. It was a very confident rehearsal period, a very confident pre-production, and I wasn't thinking about finances or touring. All I was concerned about was making my mark in a supergroup as a bass player and second lead singer.
You know we had no time, we could not even try. You know we had no time.
The opening track, the title track, has got John Lord's wonderful keyboard part in it as well. It's got the sun, as it were, of Smoke on the Water as a riff. Second only, I'd say, to Smoke on the Water as the great Deep Purple riff. And it's got these two guys on vocals, David Coverdale and Glenn Hughes, vying alongside each other.
The Glenn Hughes parts, written by Glenn Hughes. Coverdale vocal lines, written by him. So you have this welding of two different vocalists putting their stamp on a song. And for me, it just works. Absolutely works.
To me, the best thing about the track Burn is Ian Paisley's drumming, which is just absolutely phenomenal right the way through. It's like a little boy has just been let loose on a kit for the first time. And again, it's an example of how the band had some renewed vigour with the new blood in the band. And there's just a brightness and a freshness about it that still stands up now, 30 years later, I think.
Unfortunately, the rehearsals, we were booked in for a month at this castle in Wales where Bad Company and Joe Cocker rehearsed and a few others. We just played football and had seances all the time. You know, that's all we ever did. And nobody ever bloody did anything, you know. It was terrible. There's such a nice atmosphere, and it was like everybody was so lazy. Like John, he never used to get up till 6 at night, come straight down for a meal, stay there eating till about 10 o'clock at night. He'd go down to the studio and play, and by 10 o'clock at night I got pissed off anyway, and I'd go to bed. And so we hardly saw each other, you know. And then we suddenly realised we had about 4 days to left before we went to the studios, so we all went, oh, what are we going to play, what are we going to play?
I couldn't bring myself to listen to the next album, you know, in a way, because I felt choked, because, you know, something I'd been a part of, and there was somebody else singing, you know, to start with. I didn't even want to listen to it. It was very personal, you know, the whole band was personal. We've been through a lot together, you know.
Right.
And the players, like, I'd never, you know, I'd never had such experiences on stage with such players. I've never been, for example, literally moved to tears, you know, when I first worked with Richie on stage. Unbelievable.
See, I have my own dressing room because I like to tune up and I like my solitude before I go on stage. I tend not to get too involved in people because, to be quite honest, I find a lot of people are boring. I find myself boring most of the time.
That's nice.
I don't like to be caught up. I always like to be the opposite. I always was at school. That's why I don't smoke. I used to find everybody at school smoking, you know. Oh, it's a big deal, man. Smoke, you know, rebellious image. Like, I thought, well, because of that, I won't smoke, and I never have, you know. Maybe if they hadn't smoked, I would have done, you know. Yeah. Mind you, I was probably doing other things which were just as bad, if not worse. I'm still very moody, shy, and very honest, which a lot of people can't take, you know. Honest? Yeah. And which is the hardest thing in this business is to is sincerity. Once you can fake that, you're laughing, you know.
When Richie's in a band, there's going to be tension and friction, and that's the way it's going to be. And as soon as comfortable things set in, people would move and the tension would shift and people would have to leave or be fired, you know. And Byrne was the typical example of 5 guys living together, enjoying the parody of playing these great songs live, at least for 6 months, you know, while it was new.
Mark III Live was very much about David Coverdale and Glenn Hughes. They were the two who brought in a new dimension. And realistically, it was about Glenn Hughes. Glenn was a rock star. Glenn was a performer. Glenn could sing, Glenn could play bass, Glenn played up to the crowd, Glenn had an ego, Glenn had an attitude, Glenn was a star, no question. Coverdale always looked uncomfortable. He was out of his depth, realistically, very much out of his depth. He'd never done this sort of thing before. He'd never really played before more than a few hundred people in a club. Suddenly was on stage before tens of thousands, in some cases hundreds of thousands of people. How do you cope with that? And I think he withdrew into himself. He was a little bit nonplussed and overwhelmed by the whole thing. It was only the experience and what he learned from that that allowed him to go on with Whitesnake and become the great frontman we know and love to this day. But at that time, he was very much out of his depth.
Up to the first show, I was really worried. But hearing the crowd reaction was unbelievable. It was like a dream. It was magical. I was in Copenhagen, which was one of my favourite cities in the world, and the reaction was amazing. Oh, I'd only seen things like that and read about them. You know what I mean? On TV or something. But like we were dragged off the stage and all this, and I was a buzz. You know what I mean? It was just like feeling that. You just felt fucking great. You felt good. You know, it was a feeling that had you bubbling inside. It was really very nice. And I thought, oh, I'm going to like this. Audience reaction is the best dope in the world. You know, a good audience reaction. I can come off feeling fucking 2 feet taller. It's a great experience.
The Gillan lineup and the Coverdale lineup are different, but the core of the musicians who created that music and that sound, that John Lord sound, and Ian Pace's amazing drumming and Richie's thundering guitar, that was the core of Deep Purple.
And he had Richie Blackmore being moody, magnificent and evil, the man in black. Ian Pace just got on with things and was such a great drummer. He fitted neatly and nicely into what Glenn Hughes did. And John Lord just enjoyed himself on keyboards. He was the master of every ceremonies, as it were. And he, in some respects, held the whole thing together, especially later on.
When you're recording, you find that there's one engineer and a couple of T-boys around, and it doesn't really inspire you to turn out your best. Whereas when you're on stage, you're playing to the people and they inspire you, obviously, you know. I suppose it's an ego thing, really. You like to kind of basically show them what you know, and you get really inspired. You get a real exciting thing going with the crowd because they just turn you on.
We don't have many bad nights. In fact, since we've started, we've got on 3 fingers we've had maybe 3 bad nights. And when we do have a bad night, we don't fight. We just walk off, and we don't speak to each other. And the next day we go on stage. It's like that. We don't ever argue intensely. When we criticise each other, it's always polite criticism.
Yeah, you're shit, man.
I think Blackmore is one of the best, you know, like, he's as far as I'm concerned, he's a total electric musician. Him and Beck are on the same level as far as I'm concerned. Well, I think Richie's high because he's more consistent, you know, right. As much as I love Beck. But I've heard Richie play some of the finest blues, you know, that's made the hairs under my neck stand on. I agree. And he can also go to the extreme.
We got Blackmore at the tail end of, you know, Machine Head era into the burn where he could make me cry. Nobody makes me cry, really. No guitar players, you know, only other singers, but there are good singers. But some nights Richie Blackmore was so incredibly brilliant, and then some nights he would be incredibly crap, as he knows, for some strange reason of his own doing. But one thing Blackmore is we don't have characters like Blackmore anymore. We have people that like to think they can be. Blackmore is a mystique. Blackmore could still come back and rock again if he wanted to. And he might. Blackmore, to me, was a great leader of a band, although some things were the behavioral department on all of us was stupid. But he ran that band pretty much the way he wanted to run it, whether it was immature or not.
Stormbringer, we wrote basically in the studio because we've been working so hard proving the worth of the new band this year. Someone turned around and said, oh, it's time to go in the studio. I'm like, oh, fuck, you know. So it was like panic stations. and we got in, and then it worked again, fortunately. But it must be obvious to anybody with an ear who has listened to Burn and Stormbringer that it's a mature, logical progression.
I think by the time the band had got round to recording Stormbringer, which was, I think, just less than a year after they'd done Burn, again the egos had started to creep into the band, and the band had started to fragment. Glenn Hughes was becoming more dominant in his role in the band, and he obviously wanted to steer the band into a different direction. His influences really were James Brown, Stevie Wonder, and music of that ilk, which was really quite a contrast to what Deep Purple was doing. And I think on top of that, Richie Blackmore was starting to lose interest anyway, and he wasn't that focused on the album.
So you ended up with a studio album that wasn't a great record. It was a fascinating album, though, because it is very much a funky album. It took the band into a new area. It was hinted at with Burn, but the balance between the old Purple and the new Purple with Burn was perfect. This one was new Purple. This was Purple going towards the mid to late 70s, taking on board a lot more influences that Blackmore didn't feel comfortable with, but it's still a good album. Title track especially is a very strong performance.
It's not overtly funky, but there's funkier elements to the sound. I personally love it. I mean, I think that's great. And it's, you know, for the period when it came out, I mean, it was really interesting sort of rock music being made. I think this is really the basis of a lot of the arguments that the people that don't like the Mark III lineup. This is sort of where it's all grounded. Oh, they turned them into a funk band. Well, it didn't. They're just a funkier rock band than they used to be.
It'd be silly if we started suddenly writing like the Eagles, because they do it better. But we do Deep Purple better than the Eagles.
When Dave was singing like Joni Mitchell, it's silly. You do what you're good at.
Yeah, we have limitations which you accept.
What comes out is a conglomeration of 5 people's ideas and the way they play. You are what the audience make you. It's no good saying. It's no good saying you're a serious musician and everybody starts laughing at you. You know.
They're right. Exactly.
You know, if you do what you do to the best of your ability, then the audience puts you into a category. You don't. They make you. They say, well, these are now a heavy rock band. This is a nice folk band. You don't say that. You know, you're too inside it. You can't say anything.
It's a very American-orientated album. I didn't realise that at the time of recording or whatever. It was on listening. I thought it sounds like an American album. You know what I mean?
I think, was Burn mixed in the States? Definitely not, because Burn is definitely an English-sounding album.
Exactly. This is something I get from when I listen to Machine Head or something. They sound clinical, you know, like a bit dry, and I didn't want that with Burn. We got away with it. You know, it is a different sounding album from the other Purple things, but when I heard the mixed version of the new album, you know, whether that was the record plant or what, you know, but it had the sound that I wanted, you know, very me of the sound, you know, that electric intensive sound, you know, very clean, crisp, you know, rather than dry sound, clinical feel, and I thought, shit, this is, you know, really sounds like an American album.
Richie had enough. This was not what he wanted to play. You know, his idea of the Deep Purple sound is obviously much more Burn, Machine Head, in rock, kind of heavy rock.
I like black people that can sing rock and roll, but I don't like black music, funk, you know. It bores me to tears.
So you definitely don't want to see the band go that way?
Oh, no. This is as far as it goes now. It's the end of that. Back to rock and roll, next LP.
Isn't that hard because Glenn and David are so much into black music?
No, only Glenn's into black music.
He's a guy that used the words, Glenn Hughes in his shoeshine music and funky, but if you people listen to Stormbringer, please listen. Richie Blackmore is damn funky. whether he likes it or not. He played wonderfully on the album. I think at this point he'd had enough of playing. He'd lost his foothold, I think, as far as we were going in a more band direction, as far as Coverdale, Lord Pace and Hughes were. We were going in a new direction, you know, we were growing.
I wasn't, in a way, I was going through, not a personal problem, but there was like, I was thinking of other things and I should have been thinking of music, but I wasn't thinking really much on music at the time. Because I didn't have the people there that I wanted to have there, you know.
He misunderstands, what? I think he misunderstands when we talk about funky and things, because he's such a funky player, you know. Like his licks came up for the that song "You Can't Do It Right with the One You Love." What's that if it isn't funk, you know? But he thinks funk is the idea, you know. I think his idea is like cool, you know. Don't dig it, James Brown. But then again, you know, he's thinking of it in the extreme sense. I'm thinking of it in the subtle sense, you know. Like one of the funkiest bands I've ever heard is Free, and that's one of Richie's favourite bands. Right. But he doesn't regard it as funky. He calls that heavy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But to me, it's funky as well as heavy. You know. I think there's no way that I can get away from soul, because that's how I feel it. You know, whether it's rock and roll or what. Lady Double Dealer, as far as I'm concerned, is a soul song. You know, that was written from an experience. You know, that was, and I'm relating to it. When I sing it on stage, the only way I can get into the idea of singing it is to remember the time I came home and found my flat ripped to pieces, you know, by a lady. But that, I think, that's the extreme, you know. We're certainly never going to be a Coolin again, you know. So, I like Cool, don't get me wrong, but there's no way we could be, you know.
There are times when I feel like just saying, oh, let's forget it, you know, let's all go home, and we've all got enough money to just say, well, I'll do another LP when I feel like doing it. Because really, that's what every group should do. But every group is pressured by the record company. It's only guarding their own interests. A group only lasts a certain length of time, so they get the most out of them. It doesn't matter whether they fold up in 5 years, as long as they've made about 10 LPs in the meantime. Whereas in actual fact, to get the best out of a group, you've got to give them a year for each LP, I would think, for an actual progression without forcing it. And that really bugs me, actually, going to the studio. Right, we're going to turn out an LP, boys. You know, here we go, blah, blah, blah. I've got to write a song today, you know. It's just ridiculous, you know. Yeah. And I don't know if I've got the guts to do it, but I've often thought, that's it. I'd like to leave, not the band, I just want to get out of the business, play when I feel like playing, and do a record when I feel like recording. It would be fantastic, but you can't have it all your own way, you know.
It's so difficult to comprehend what was going through Richie Blackmore's mind when he put together anything. But when he put together Mark III, Glenn Hughes, funky bassist, renowned for that area of music, an area of music Blackmore wasn't comfortable with and never has been. What was he thinking? I actually believe that Blackmore was looking to take Purple in a new direction, away from what they'd done, because it was boring for him. He wanted to move them forward. What he ended up with was a lineup of the band and a style and sound of the band he didn't really want to live with. By the time they'd done the Burn tour and were starting to write for Stormbringer, I think he realised it's not for him, doesn't want to do this, and he wanted to go in the direction of the Richie Blackmore's Rainbow. That's where he wanted to go. And I think he was getting a bit bored and fed up with the ego trips that Glenn Hughes was having, and also carrying David Coverdale along. And I think he just backed away and said, enough, I'm moving on, good luck guys.
The reason Richie left Deep Purple was, and I can't quote his exact words, but I can quote the sort of basic statement was, I want to do something different. Right. That's what he said. Right. Now what happened is he left us and he did exactly the same. Yeah. And when he left, we did something different. We changed. And we say, if anything, Richie was the person which was holding it in one place.
Yeah, but...
And he took it away, and he took that same thing with him.
Could I just enhance what Ian said?
You can do what you like.
No, also, a very, very major part of that was the fact that Blackmore wanted people to do things how he imagined. Instead of when you present a song to a group, it's a group song. Everybody puts their identity on it for a group sound and a group feeling, right? Blackmore wanted puppets, you know, that he could manipulate into doing exactly what the fuck he wanted. And with that, it's still restricting for a free-thinking musician, you know, or a self-expressive musician, to cope with that kind of situation.
Started with Black Sheep of the Family, the song. I put it to the Purple, let's do the song. And they went, no, why should we? I'm like, but it's such a great song. And they went, no, we didn't write it. I'm like, what's that got to do with that? And I'm like, because you won't get any writing credits, you don't do this song? Yep. That was basically the bottom line. So I said, well, I'm going to do it with somebody else. And Ronnie was just around at the time. That threw me too. And if someone comes along that has a good song, you go, let's do that song. You don't go, well, it's not one of our songs. A lot of that went down with Purple. I can never understand that. It was Patey and John that were adamant about not doing anybody else's songs.
There was never any great love lost between me and Richie. And I didn't dislike him and he didn't dislike me. We just didn't, apart from the first 2 or 3 years, or first 2 years, there was no common ground, really. Apart from a meeting point in the middle on certain musical.
You obviously worked well together, what sounded like it worked well.
We worked extremely well. I mean, some of those guitar organ duels that we used to do, I still think are among the best things I've ever played. But there was nothing to do with friendship, necessarily. It was to do with a common response to each other's talent, whatever.
Like Glenn and I, with the kind of voices that we had, and the unusual blend, it could have been a sensational fucking opposite to John and Richie and Glenn and I. But the ego took over. I didn't have that much of an ego in those days. Now I'm fucking totally conceited. But like I couldn't handle his, you know, upfront attitude. You know what I mean?
I don't have much patience for people, and I'm a very moody person. And it's like, misunderstood? No, not really, because I want them to understand that I'm a moody person and that life is not a bowl of cherries. You know, music is, you're always fighting music to get to the bottom of something. You can't, you know, go through life shaking people's hands and going, everything's wonderful. If you're a newborn Christian, maybe. I just, you know, for me, it's, life is a struggle. There's icebergs everywhere. You've got to dodge them.
You couldn't get close to Richie. I think anybody can, as soon as you get close to Blackmore, you're gone. As far as, you know, gone, either fired or you're gone spiritually, because, you know, he doesn't want comfort, he wants tension. I like that. I want to thank him for pushing me and actually robbing me to make me a better singer, bass player. The old drama of don't come across my side of the stage because I'll hit you with my guitar. I want to thank him for that, because it showed truth, arrogance, and somewhat of a genius to do that.
Once Blackmore left Deep Purple, he got a mess. Complete and utter mess. There was no direction anymore. There was no guidance. You had no one who could take leadership control of the band the way Blackmore had. John Lord wasn't suited to that role. He was much more of a diplomat. He could hold things together. Glenn Hughes has never been a leader. It's not what he's about. He can't lead. He can be part of something, and certainly part of a supergroup. He can hold his own. Coverdale didn't have the experience to lead at the point at all. So what did you have? You had a band who looked at each other saying, where the hell do we go? And they got in Tommy Bolin on guitar, the late Tommy Bolin, which was a huge mistake because it didn't work.
I don't think anybody really is the right choice to replace Ritchie Blackmore. You can't really replace Ritchie Blackmore. He's such an integral part and such a major part of Deep Purple.
Should Purple have called it a day after Blackmore quit? Probably, even though I think Come Taste the Band is a great record and it introduced Tommy Bolin's guitar talent to a much wider audience. Perhaps they shouldn't have called it Deep Purple. I don't know.
When Blackmore left, they really should have said, end of the band, let's move on into different directions. They didn't. They carried on one album too far.
David, heard me on Cobham albums and stuff, you know. Yeah, why not? And James Gang albums. And they were looking all over the East Coast, New York and Boston and yada yada, you know, I guess. And I lived 2 minutes from him in Malibu, in California. It was ridiculous. So.
And how did he actually approach you?
He just called up and they just said, do you wanna, jam a bit? And I said, yeah. You know, I wasn't that enthused about being in an English band.
Why?
Because English bands tend to be a bit sterile a lot. You know, I mean, everything is exact. I mean, every time they play, it's the same jokes, the same. You know, it really is. I mean, it's it gets to a point of being really bland, and I just didn't want to. You know, the way I play, I didn't want to be a part of that. So. When I did go down, it was within the first, tune, I knew that it was, they're a very Americanized English band. I mean, they grew up with the same roots as I grew up with, which really amazed me. They were kind of in a slump because I think of the situation with Ritchie being, from what I gather, don't even come on my side of the stage routine, which is really a lot of...
And you're the opposite, you run from one side to the other.
Well, I always have, even, I mean, a band is a band, I mean, if you're going to go out solo, you go out solo, but if you're in a band, you're in a band.
Tommy Bolin, in many respects, was Blackmore's equal, in a different way. Tommy Bolin's style of music, which was blues and soul-based, he was as good at that as Blackmore was at what he did. No question. A virtuoso in his own right, great talent. But Tommy Bolin didn't really fit into what Deep Purple should be. They'd moved so far away from what they were. And the other problem, and I know it sounds very strange to say it in this day and age, is that Tommy Bolin was an American. And because he was an American in a British institution, the fans over here didn't appreciate it, and he was jeered off stage more than once.
I saw Deep Purple at the Glasgow Apollo, 14th of March 1976, 7 days after my birthday. And I was blown away, but I mean, I was only a kid. I was blown away. I'd never seen them before. I was reveling in the fact that these guys were on the stage. And Tommy Bolin looked great. And I thought he played well. I've never heard a bootleg of the show. There were lots of calls for Blackmore. I don't think that it helped that Glenn Hughes introduced him as the greatest guitar player in the world. That wasn't going to work.
Bolin was a brilliant guitar player. You only have to listen to his two solo albums, Private Eyes and Teaser, to know that. Or he was in the James Gang, he played with Alphonse Mouzon. But unfortunately he had big substance abuse problems that they didn't know about at the time. And unfortunately Glenn Hughes also was suffering from similar problems, and of course it was just an absolute disaster putting the pair of those two in the band.
Besides the music, Tommy, have you got any other outside interests? Hobbies?
Tennis. I play tennis. I just mainly just
music.
Music and drinking and burning and looting.
I'm not going to tell you that we had a great time, Tommy and I, cavorting around the globe, stoned, because it wasn't great. Drugs started to creep into Deep Purple for me mid-tour on the Cal Jam period, where I had not known I had a problem until a year later. You never do. What happened was, I think all of us in the band were dabbling in intoxication, whether it be drink or drugs. I'm not going to name names, it's not my style. But certain members were doing this and certain members were doing that. But when it came to the shove where people were going to sleep and I was basically still partying with the crew, didn't know I had a problem until Come Taste the Band. It affected my attitude for sure. I was very, I don't know, over the top in a lot of things. I was never mean to anybody. I just was probably mean to myself. In hindsight, I wish I could have got a grip of it. But years later I did, and I've become a better person because of that.
Come Taste the Band was a bloody great album. You know, it had some fabulous ideas on it, and some great possibilities for direction changes, which wouldn't have been too right-angled. You know, they would have been reasonably part of the same direction that we'd been in. It's just that it was the internal thing in the band didn't allow that, unfortunately, to be held together.
I think Come Taste the Band is an excellent rock album. It's not a Deep Purple album. It's so far removed from what Deep Purple was. They virtually gave Tommy Bolin carte blanche to write all the songs. So suddenly there's this completely new sound that Deep Purple had not had before. It was a great rock album. It's far more rockier than Stormbringer had been. Bolin's guitar work on it is fine. There's massive overdubs, lots of heavy guitar work, lots of great solos. But as I say, it's not a Deep Purple album.
I think for most people, it's Come Taste the Band and spit it out. It really isn't a good album. You Keep On Moving is a wonderful track. Drifter's a very good track. Most of the rest of it didn't work because they didn't have any sense of gelling. There was no direction. It was as if the band carried on for business reasons. You can't split up because too many people are relying on you generating too much money. There's no artistic or creative reason on Come Taste the Band.
They recorded Coming Home without me, because I'd actually had a bit of a meltdown on the 18th floor of the Arabella Hotel, where I confronted a couple of my guys in the crew due to my intoxication behind cocaine. When I got a copy of Come Taste the Band, there was a song called The Dealer, which I'd sang called Something Else, where I got a copy of the master, and Dealer comes on, I'm starting to start, and here comes David's voice, singing a whole new lyric, which they'd taken my voice off, which blew me away, because my version was bitching. And, of course, coming home, when I heard the opening of the album, I'm going, wait a minute. I don't remember being on that song. But, like I say, there's no mistakes in God's world. You know, it happens to every band. A lot of people in their 20s died of drug abuse, like Tommy and my brother, Paul Kossoff, and other guys that, you know, died. I scraped myself off the gates of insanity quite a couple of times. But I'm proud of the work I did in Deep Purple.
I still believe that there was a time when Purple was arguably one of the best live performance rock and roll, the hard rock bands in the world.
Absolutely. For a couple of years it was the best.
And Dave and Glenn's entrance into the band did nothing to stop that reputation. It was only after a while that something started to go wrong. You know, egos took over. Money became so available
And the band became dishonest to themselves as the musicians that they were, and it stopped being a group in the sense of a group. And if we'd done any more recording or continued, it would have been so diverse under the Deep Purple umbrella, it would have been totally insulting to anybody buying a Deep Purple album. I would think. And I think we did the right thing to knock it on the head.
We did a concert in Liverpool. We did a short English tour.
March the 28th, 1976.
We looked at each other, and nobody actually said a word, but everybody knew what was in everybody's mind. And that was the end of it. And at the end of the tour, Tommy came home. He came home here, and he started doing his own thing because he had his second album out. And then 5-6 months later, we heard the news.
Off the record.
Bowley was dead within 6 months of leaving Deep Purple from a heroin overdose, and I don't think that, if the band had continued, I don't think that would have kept him alive any longer. It was a very ignominious end to what were a classic rock band, who unfortunately probably just tried to push it a little bit too far.
One thing people should know about Deep Purple, there was a lot of deception, lies and betrayal going on behind the scenes with other things. There was a lot of splinters going on, a lot of people not telling the truth, a lot of people sick and tired of being sick and tired. We were all 5 different guys on 5 different missions. I was glad when it was over. I wanted to get away. I was tired. I didn't want to make another record of unfocused rock music. 3 albums is enough. 3 albums and 2 live albums is enough.